in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and I'll build larger ones. There, I will store all my grain and all my goods, and I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things that you have prepared, whose will they be?' And so it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." And this is the gospel of the Lord. When I was 5 years old, I used to love to go to my aunt and uncle's house in Palmer, Massachusetts. They lived on the second floor of a farmhouse, and next to that farmhouse was an immense barn. And it was a place of great intrigue for me because my brother and I used to love to go in there. You'd look up and it was, at least as high as this church with lofts that you could climb up. We were forbidden to climb up in the lofts, which is exactly why we did it. And you would look out of this big wide door, and outside was this pulley in which they pull up the bales of hay up into the upper loft. And it was important that they had this big barn, you see, because they had cattle, they had cows, and in the harsh New England winters, you had to have that food ready for them to feed them throughout the whole winter time. And I thought about that barn as I was reading this gospel this morning, and thinking about the fact that most of us don't have barns like that, but if you want to keep in the spirit of the gospel, you might be able to say that we do have barns. They're the storage places of what we own, and so in a special way, I suppose our houses are our barns. And we fill them with all kinds of things that we think are important, and some of them, of course, are critical. We fill them with places to store our food, keep them for our children. These are the places where we reside, and so, yeah, we do. We have barns in our life. They have addresses. It's where you live. It is important to realize as you look at this text that Jesus is really not up against a person having things, because he says at the very end, "And so it is for those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." And as you look at this text, did you notice how many times the word "I" appeared? This is really kind of a great narcissistic little story, isn't it? What should I do? I have no place. I will do this. I'll pull down my barns. I will store my grain. I will say to my soul, good, he's talking to his soul now. Soul, you have ample goods laid up, eat, drink, be merry. And there's something about this text that all of us want to say, good for you, boy, you got it. God has got you for this one. Because we don't like greedy people, do we? Greed is one of those things that we look upon those people who exemplify this negative virtue as the very thing that, well, that may be somebody else, but it certainly isn't me. But it's a very intangible type of thing, isn't it? This greed that resides in the souls of all of us. We don't like to talk about it. Martin Luther used a little Latin phrase that was called incurvatur in se, which is everything comes into me. I am the final analysis. Everything comes in. I remember somebody talking about saying, have you ever met a person with a dark hole mentality? You know what dark holes out in stellar space, right? There are those dead stars that are so magnetic, so powerful, that even light is taken in. Even light can't escape. And every now and then you meet that type of personality that is so narcissistic that everything is kind of taken into them. You may be talking to them and they don't want to say it, but all of a sudden they'll say, well, enough about you, let's talk about me. Okay? And in this whole text of what this is going on in here, Jesus really, really knows what human nature is all about because we're sucked into these things so easily. Take a look, for example, at advertising. And if you notice advertising, and I remember studying a bit about advertising, and one of the crucial issues was if you want a person to buy your product, what you want to do is to cater to their sense of insecurity. What does it mean to have bad breath? Especially if you're on a romantic search. Well, there are answers to that, aren't there? What does it mean to have hair that isn't soft and glossy? What does it mean to not have the things that you desire? What does it mean? And every ad, now do this to yourself, watch the ads. See, it's kind of a clever two-step. Create the insecurity, supply the remedy. And the insecurity of this man is he just can't get enough. And so, let's see, we'll just store everything up in bigger barns. And I love the way he says, soul, talking to a mirror. If he was talking into a three-way mirror, you'd probably think he was praying to the Trinity. Yeah. The problem is we don't like to think about our mortality, do we? We don't like to think about somebody else getting our stuff, which is exactly what the whole thing from Ecclesiastes was. Because here in this text we have the oldest recorded history of a man in full-blown depression. And he is. I work for everything, and who's going to get it? It won't be me. It's going to be somebody stupid. What do mortals get from all this toil and strain for which they toil under the sun? All their days are filled with pain. Work is a vexation. Even at night they don't rest. All is vanity, chasing after the wind. I've seen it happen to everybody else. I see it happening to me every time I realize I'm a year older, not younger, older, getting closer to that point in life when my mortality will come upon me. And who's going to care? Certainly not my kids. They can't wait to read the will. Give me mine. I think one of the saddest things, and I've seen it, man, I gotta tell you, doing funerals, and some of the kids just sit there, you know, and I'm thinking, oh, you're not sad, I wonder why, because they can't wait to see the lawyer, that's why. And I've seen it happen over and over again. Leslie and I have had to clean up her mother and father's house after they both passed away, going through the things that seem so important. And they weren't any different than anyone else, little treasures, trinkets, etc., and so on, that we hold on to, mementos. Those are themselves not bad, but when you all of a sudden have a house that's filled with all of the stuff that was supposed to define who that person was, then you're in trouble. I am defined by this Persian carpet. I'll be darned if Aunt Lucy's going to get it. Over and over again. The nervousness of this text and everything that we see this morning is the nervousness of the insecurity of the fact that we're not going to live forever. Because the bigger the barn was, the worse it got. And God looks down from heaven and says, oh, you still don't get it, do you? Still don't get it. And so the text goes on and says, okay, you're all done. Too bad. Now you're coming home with me. But I don't want to go. If I can't take it with me, I'm not going. Really? Think about that. Now, the trick is, of course, to go home and look around your barn. Your house. If I were to ask any of you, or anybody would ask me, what's more important, the people in your life or the things you own? I know what that answer is going to be. It's the people in my life. And yet, it's so easy to fall into the other side of it, isn't it? You can't go out and buy what the soul really craves for at Kmart, can you? Those are just temporary things. I remember when I was dating Leslie, I had a white Mercury Cougar. Do you remember the Mercury Cougar? It was Mercury's answer to the Ford Mustang. It was all white with one of those wonderful vinyl black tops. An XR7, and I looked up and it looked like the airplane cockpit, all these switches. Gorgeous. And it had those little covers in front of the headlights that would peek up at night. And my Cougar would prowl the streets. I like that car. But it had to go sooner or later because when the kids came along, the back seat wasn't all that big, so we needed something bigger. And I remember about 20 years later, I saw what could have been my Cougar, and it was in a junkyard. One eye good open. Rusted. And the Old Testament thought, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of the Lord is forever. And I think that's what the text is trying to talk to us this morning. As you look around at your barn, the things that you've accumulated that somebody else someday is going to own anyway, especially the things that we think are wonderful and our kids say, no thanks, you can have that one. That there is something to be said, as Jesus said, take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for life does not consist in the abundance of what you own. Take a look at your barn. And I've seen some of your barns. I think you have nice barns. I like the barn I live in too. But out in the garage, once bought with all the love he had for his wife, is my mother-in-law's cedar chest. We asked our kids, do you want this? No. Why? Well, it's kind of look old-fashioned looking. It looks like something that was built in the 40s. And upstairs, in one of our bedrooms, is the cedar chest I bought Leslie, and I'm wondering, are my kids going to want that? It's a treasure that somebody may not even want after I'm gone. Think of it that way and say to yourself, what is it? And what does it mean to be rich toward God? And you know what? I think that is very individual, don't you? Because what we think is rich toward God may be highly different from the person sitting next to you. But it has to be pondered. Because God knows that, as he said, death does come like a thief in the night. And you've got to think about these things before the thief comes. And if Jesus calls us into this type of life, he promises something that is clearly very important. And in the prayer of the faithful, these were the words that you heard just a minute ago. Benevolent God, you are the source, the guide, and the goal of our lives. Teach us to love what is worth loving, to reject what is offensive to you, and to treasure what is precious in your sight. I suppose we could start with a picture of 4-year-old Paul. You might start there and you will see what is precious in God's sight. And then you can take and run with it from there. And you can do it, you see. Because, you see, that's why you're here this morning, isn't it? That's why the air conditioning is on in our barn. Now when you leave this wonderful church barn and go back to your own barn, take count of the things that you own that nobody else is going to care about sooner or later. And ask yourselves, what is it that Christ wants me to see that he sees and doesn't really care about what we own and wants us to see what is really precious and beautiful, what is wonderful in life other than the gift of life itself. And it's secured out into eternity, to be sure, for us, but it's not meant to be sitting around here waiting for the goods to come in from God. It's to be lived